The Holy Gospel is written in the 17th chapter of St. Luke, beginning at the 5th verse. The apostle said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron, and serve me while I eat and drink. Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. Interesting lesson that we have today. The disciples, the 12 Jesus chose, the 12 that were with Jesus all the time, are spending time with him, and they look at Jesus and they say, "Give me more faith. Increase my faith." Evidently, they felt something was missing, that they weren't strong enough, that maybe they couldn't do the same kind of things that Jesus had and did. Increase our faith. You can relate to that, can't you? Haven't you many times wished that your faith was stronger? That you had more to share? Yeah, we're under the same impression as the apostles. We think that more is better and less is bad. The more we have, the more we can accumulate, the more that we can say is ours, the better off we feel. And yet, that isn't necessarily the best. What Jesus really says to these people in return, these 12, these chosen, the ones that have spent time with him, said it's not a matter of a degree of faith, it's using what you have. You've got enough faith. Don't need more. Use what you have. And that's a lesson that's all difficult for us to learn, to understand. How many people have said, if I won the lottery, everything would be fine. Then I'd have enough money to pay off the mortgage, pay off the bills, have something left over. And oh, wouldn't life be so good if I won the lottery? And one of the interesting things we find about lottery winners is those that were broke when they won the lottery 5 years later are broke again. And they suddenly discover it wasn't a matter of having something or not having. It wasn't the ability, it was the ability not to be able to manage what they had. I like that story about the auction where an old violin was brought to the auction. And the auctioneer tried to get a bid on it, and he got nothing. It's an old beat-up thing. Nobody can play that. That can't have any kind of beautiful music left in it. And then somebody from the crowd came up, and he started to play. And the violin sounded incredibly good. The price became very expensive. I did this to one of my friends one time. I looked at their piano and I said, "You need a new piano. It's not sounding very good. You could have it tuned, but it probably won't be any good anyway." Their niece came later that afternoon, went to the piano and started playing it. It was incredible. There was nothing wrong with it. It was the practice, the ability to play it properly and to use what you had to make this instrument sound good. A number of years ago, a man stood in front of his bakery and demolished a wall. It was 16 feet high and 28 feet long. I don't know why he did it. Story doesn't tell that, the reasoning for that. But he had two sons, a son by the name of Will and another one by the name of Harry. And he called them in. He said, we have no wall left, and I want you two to build a wall. And they said, we're only in high school. We don't have the ability. We can't do that. And he said, well, I'll show you. But you do have the ability. And so the next day when they came home from school, Will said, he sat down with us and he gave us a brick. And he showed us how to make cement. And he said the way you build a wall is you put this brick down, and then you put the cement on it, and then you put another brick on top of it. Oh, you space it. But here's the way you build it. And he laid 3 bricks, and he said, we'll try it again tomorrow night. And so the next night we came back, and he showed us how to lay a few more bricks. He said, after a year and a half, my brother and I had built the wall. Again, 16 feet high, 28 feet long. He said, my father came out and looked at the wall, and he said, now, boys, never tell me that you don't have the ability to build a wall. Never tell me that you don't have the ability to do anything. It's all within you. All you got to do is use it. The person that tells the story is Will Smith, very prominent actor now in Hollywood. A lesson that he learned from his father that changed his life, he said, as a 10th grader. There's so much that you have within yourself that you don't use. It's incredible. Do you know that in every step that you take, you create 6 volts of energy? Isn't that an interesting thing? You create energy, 6 volts, by just lifting your foot and putting it down. There was some enterprising individual who was an engineer, Victoria Station in London. And he said, how many people go through this turnstiles every day in Victoria Station? He said 34,000. And he started figuring. 34,000 people a day taking an average of 100 steps at 6 volts a step. What kind of energy does that create? And so he built something that they put sensors in the floor, and people generate energy just by walking across the floor with the sensors. All that power, all that ability was there. All he had to do was find somebody that would discover how to use it. I had the privilege last Sunday of worshiping at Kihei Lutheran. Kihei. It's the congregation I started. I didn't know anything about starting a congregation. And when I called the synod and suggested it happen, they said, we've never had any success there. It won't happen. We won't support it. Got together 4 other families. Said, wouldn't it be nice to have an ALC church at that time, ALC church in Kihei? Say, yeah, it would. But how can we do that? I guess we just go out and talk to people and see if anybody else is interested and start it up. And where we started was on the beach. 8 people. 8 bricks. And when I was at church there on Sunday, there were 250 people. And that's off season. The church is paid off. The extra building, the children's building, the parish hall is paid off. It's a thriving congregation. I didn't know anything about American missions. He said, you don't know anything about doing this? But the power is there, you see. The power is there if you use it. And that's what Jesus was telling his apostles. It's not a matter of having more faith. It's finding what's inside of you and using it. Jesus used the illustration of the mustard seed. It's 1/10 of an inch, but you plant it and it grows to such an extent that the birds make home for it. And that's the same with you. It's discovering that it's not something you have received. You've already received it. The Old Testament is full of illustrations of people that God chose that said they didn't have the talent. Abraham, the father of 3 religions, now, I don't have the ability. Take someone else. Calling to Moses, set my people free. I don't have the ability. Just go try it. You might discover you haven't. He chose Gideon and his 300 men. Gideon, who was said to be the weakest man in Israel, he chose him to lead an army of 300 against an army of thousands, and they reigned victorious. And Samuel came to Jesse and he said, I need to see your sons because we're going to crown one of them the king of Israel. And he went through all the brothers, and all of a sudden, Samuel said, is this all you got? And Jesse said, oh no, we got one other. It's David. He's out in the field, but he's a kid. He's tending the sheep. He's of no value. Samuel said, let me see him. This guy can't rule Israel. This guy hasn't got the talent to be a king. But Samuel saw a seed. He saw a brick. And he said, I'm going to build a kingdom with this kid. And David became the most famous, the most dedicated king in the history of Israel. We asked for more faith. And Jesus said, you got it. Just use what you got. We need all kinds of things. There's so many churches ready to give up that want to close their doors. We need more members. You don't necessarily need the more members. You need to activate what you've got. There's a young 16-year-old gaining national recognition. Her name is, and she's Swedish, Greta Thunberg. You probably heard about it. She started deciding that there was really a problem with global warming. And so she got involved, and she got her parents to give up meat. I guess that's a problem with global warming. But she's gone nationwide, and a couple of weeks ago, there were 150 nations that had children out on the streets saying something has to be done. Well, Greta Thunberg is a 16-year-old. She has some eating disorders. She's got compulsive disorder. And when Greta was asked on national television, what about these things that you've got that are really supposed to slow you down? She said, what those diseases do is enable me to concentrate. It doesn't make me retreat and fall back like so many do. We look at the church today. We need more members. We need more of this, more of that. The reality is that here is the talent. It's within us. We have the ability. We have the power. We have so many powers. We have the power to forgive sin, forgive other people, and make a harmonious community and a wonderful, loving church. We have the power to work on one individual to get them involved, either more in the church or involve somebody outside to become involved. We have the ability not to become stumbling blocks for others. And we could go on and on and on. The disciples, those closest to Jesus, said, "Come and give me something more." And Jesus said, "You got what you need, just use it." And we come this morning, we say, we need so much more. In reality, we've got what we need. All we need to do is use it. Amen.